When my wife told me she wanted to sleep with other people, I didn't lose my cool. Instead, I agreed, but I had a plan of my own. What started as her freedom turned into my ultimate payback, and the story's just getting started. Alright, I get it, this probably sounds like a pretty bold way to start off, but you'll see why soon enough. I'm 38 years old, and over the last few months, I've found myself in bed with not one, not two, but three absolutely stunning women. And no, this isn't some fantasy or exaggerated story, it's real. Each one of them, gorgeous, seductive, and all part of my plan. Now, before you start rolling your eyes, thinking I'm just making this up to sound like some kind of player, let me set the record straight. This wasn't about proving anything, nor was it some desperate act of a man facing a midlife crisis. No, this was calculated revenge, cold, deliberate payback for my wife. Yep, you heard that right. And if you're thinking this is some feel-good tale where I find clarity or forgiveness, you're wrong. This is raw, messy, and completely unapologetic. So if you're curious about how it all unfolded, strap in, because I'm laying it all out there, no holding back. Let me take you back to where it all started. I'm just your average guy, nothing flashy. I'm not some high roller living the good life. I've been married for 12 years now, and we've been together even longer. We have 2 kids, a house, the whole package, just like a lot of people. If you'd asked me a few months ago how things were going, I'd have told you that our marriage wasn't perfect, but it wasn't falling apart either. It was like that old pair of sneakers you've had forever, they're worn, a little beat up, but they still get the job done. I thought we were solid. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. The night it all fell apart seemed like any other. I came home from work, feeling tired but ready to settle in for a quiet evening. She had dinner ready, something nice, like she was really putting in some effort. I noticed that look on her face, like she had something serious on her mind, but I wasn't expecting the bomb she was about to drop. We sat down at the table, the kids were already in bed, and I started eating like it was just another regular night. But then, she started talking, not the usual chit-chat about how our days went, but some real heavy stuff about our relationship. Out of nowhere, she began talking about how stale things had gotten, like the spark in our marriage had faded. Her words were like small cuts, each one stinging a little more than the last, but I kept my cool. Look, I'm not going to lie, I knew things had slowed down between us. After a dozen years together, 2 kids, and both of us working full-time, things naturally lose a bit of their excitement. But in my mind, that just meant we had to work harder at it. Marriage isn't easy, it takes effort. Apparently, though, I was the only one thinking that way. I sat there, listening to her drone on about how bored she was and how routine our life had become. I was halfway through my meal when she dropped the real bombshell. She said she wanted to open our marriage. I froze. The food in my mouth turned tasteless, like it was just a bunch of rubber in my mouth. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was screaming. I thought she might say something about going to therapy, or maybe even talk about how we could add some excitement to our relationship. But this? This was something I hadn't seen coming at all. She kept talking, completely unaware of the storm building inside me. I don't see it as cheating, she said, like she was talking about switching to a new exercise routine. Just for a little while. We both need some freedom, some space. Space. Freedom. The audacity. She was sitting there, calmly telling me she wanted to sleep with other people like it was the most normal thing in the world. And she said it so casually, like she was suggesting we try out a new restaurant or something. She wanted to keep the stability of our marriage while getting a free pass to mess around without feeling guilty. I didn't say a word. I just kept chewing, nodding every so often like I was actually considering what she was saying. But inside, I was holding back the urge to flip the whole table and walk out. Something clicked in that moment, though. As she kept talking about how this could help us, I realized something: our marriage was already dead. She just didn't have the guts to admit it yet. When your wife asks for an open relationship, it's over. She's already moved on, emotionally, mentally, and probably physically too. What she was really saying wasn't that we needed space. She had already found someone, I knew it. I could feel it in the way she was so eager to pitch the idea, to make it sound reasonable. She wasn't asking for permission, she was trying to legitimize what had already started happening. But instead of losing it, instead of confronting her right then and there, I played it cool. I agreed. Yeah, I agreed to her ridiculous idea. Why? Because I knew I could play the long game. She thought she had the upper hand, that she'd just earned her hall pass to fool around while I sat at home like a clueless fool. But she didn't know what I had in store. If she wanted an open relationship, fine. I'd let her think she was calling the shots, but I'd get my revenge in ways she couldn't even imagine. So yeah, I agreed. I smiled, took another bite of that now flavorless dinner, and said, you know what? Maybe you're onto something. And that's where it all began. That night, after our little chat about an open relationship, sleep was nowhere to be found. She was lying right next to me, sound asleep, wearing those ridiculous earplugs and that eye mask she swears by for better rest. I couldn't help but chuckle. Here she was, acting like everything was perfectly normal, blissfully unaware of what I was about to do. We never hid anything from each other before, or at least that's what I thought. We shared everything, phones, passwords, all of it. So when I slid my hand under her pillow to grab her phone, I prayed she hadn't changed her password. My heart was pounding as I tapped in the code. Bingo, it unlocked. The rush of emotions that hit me was unreal. I felt a mix of relief, anger, and anticipation all at once. She really thought I wouldn't catch on. The first thing I did was open her messages. I'll admit, my hands were trembling. My mind was racing with the fear of what I was about to uncover, and it didn't take long to find out. Right there, in the middle of the chat app, was the guy. Some young, pretty boy with a smug grin in his profile picture, probably thinking he'd scored himself a little side gig with my wife. Their messages, well, let's just say they weren't subtle. Whether or not they had crossed the line physically yet didn't even matter. It was clear, she was halfway out the door already. The way they were talking, the way she was responding, it was all right there. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Does it even matter if they hadn't slept together yet? I mean, betrayal is betrayal, and emotional cheating. To me, that's just as painful as the physical kind. And by the looks of those messages, it wasn't going to stay emotional for long. The flirty emojis, the pictures, they were building up to something inevitable. I took screenshots of everything. I saved his Instagram profile, and I sent it all to myself for safekeeping. I had enough evidence to tear this whole thing wide open whenever I wanted. But I wasn't ready to do that just yet. No, I had to be smart about this. So what did I do next? I called in reinforcements. I knew this wasn't something I could handle alone. It was the middle of the night, but I didn't care. I grabbed my phone and called a few of my closest friends. I knew they'd be pissed at me for waking them up, but this couldn't wait. I needed them on board with what I was about to do. One by one, I got through to them. I didn't give much detail on the phone, just told them to meet me at the park. No questions, just show up. We all arrived around the same time. It must have been 2 a.m. by then. The park was empty, just a few streetlights casting long shadows across the grass. They were confused at first, and yeah, probably a little annoyed, but when they saw the look on my face, they knew it was serious. What the hell is going on? One of them asked, rubbing his eyes and yawning. I didn't waste any time. I told them everything, the dinner, the open relationship talk, the messages I had found. At first, they were speechless, just standing there, taking it all in. But when I showed them the screenshots, their shock quickly turned into anger. What's your next move? Another one asked, clearly trying to keep his own frustration in check. That's when I told them my plan. It wasn't all laid out yet, but I had a pretty good idea of what needed to happen. I wasn't going to let her play me for a fool. I needed to get ahead of this, make sure that when everything came crashing down, I'd be the one in control, not her. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed them to help me pull it off. At first, they thought I was crazy. I could see it in their eyes, the whole thing sounded nuts, maybe a little too extreme. But after we hashed it out, made a few tweaks to the plan, they were on board. They knew what was at stake, and they knew I wasn't just acting out of spite. This had to be done the right way, and we all agreed, no half measures. By the time we left the park, a sense of dread had settled in my chest, mixed with a strange sense of relief. On one hand, I had my plan in place, and my friends had my back. But on the other hand, I knew there was no turning back now. What I was about to do would change everything, and I had to be ready for the fallout. I got home quietly, slipped back into bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling. The fear crept in, no doubt. What if this all blew up in my face? What if she caught wind of what I was planning before I could pull it off? But then I remembered those messages, the way she was so confident, so sure she had me fooled. That rage started bubbling up again, and I knew, deep down, this had to be done. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds, I was already wide awake, my thoughts spinning like a whirlwind. The revelations from the night before were still fresh in my mind, stinging like an open wound. There was no way I was going to sit around and pretend everything was fine. I had to act, and I had to do it now. Without wasting a second, I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of a divorce lawyer. It didn't matter that it was early. If this guy was as good as his online reviews claimed, he'd understand why I was calling at the crack of dawn. The moment he answered, I didn't bother with small talk. I want to file for divorce, I said, my voice steady, but with a sharp edge. My wife's been cheating on me, and I need the paperwork started immediately. There was a brief pause on his end, probably thrown off by how direct I was. Maybe he wasn't used to clients being so blunt. Either way, he quickly snapped back into professional mode, asking for basic details and laying out the steps we'd need to follow. He started to mention gathering evidence, but I cut him off. Don't worry about that, I said firmly. I've already got more than enough. We scheduled a meeting for that afternoon to get the ball rolling. As I hung up, a rush of adrenaline surged through me. It was real now. I wasn't just some clueless husband discovering his wife's emotional affair, I was about to end our marriage. And while that hurt, I refused to let her come out on top. Not by a long shot. But here's the thing, this wasn't just about filing for divorce. If all I wanted was a clean break, I could have packed up and left. No, I was in this for something far bigger than just ending things. I wanted revenge. There was no way I was going to let her walk away from this unscathed. My friends, loyal as ever, had already tracked down the guy she was about to cheat with. It wasn't hard. The idiot had his Instagram wide open for the world to see, flaunting his fake influencer lifestyle like he was some big shot. Expensive watches, rented cars, photos with models who probably didn't even know his name. He was the classic wannabe, desperate to seem more important than he actually was. The best part? When my friends confronted him, he crumbled. I had braced myself for some kind of resistance, maybe even a fight, but no, this guy was all bark, no bite. I didn't even need to be there. He spilled everything without so much as a threat. Man, I swear, I didn't know she was married, he stammered, as if that was going to save him. My friends didn't even have to raise their voices. They laid it out for him, he was in over his head, caught up in something way bigger than he realized. And the moment he grasped the gravity of the situation, he practically begged for a way out. I'll give him this much, he knew when he was beat. He didn't try to argue, didn't put up any defense. He understood that messing with a married woman wasn't just going to ruin his little fantasy, it could blow up his entire life if he wasn't careful. So, I gave him a choice. Either he disappeared from her life forever, or he became my informant. I didn't want him hurt, I wasn't looking to ruin his life completely, that wasn't my endgame. Sure, I was angry, but my anger wasn't directed at him. This was about her. She was the one who made the decision to stray, and if it wasn't him, it would have been someone else. So rather than waste time on some two-bit wannabe, I turned him into a pawn. From that point on, every little thing they planned came straight to me. Their secret meetings. I knew about them before they happened. Their flirty texts. I had screenshots of every last one. My friends kept tabs on him, and he fed me information in return for keeping his life relatively intact. I made it crystal clear, if he even thought about warning her, he'd regret it. And just like that, he became my little puppet, passing along every detail. He kept me in the loop, and I used that knowledge to tighten the noose around her little secret. Then came the day of their so-called big meeting, the day she thought she was being so clever, sneaking off for the weekend. It was a Friday morning, and over breakfast, she casually mentioned that she'd be heading to her parents' house for a few days. Her tone was light, nonchalant, like she was just planning a little family visit. But I could see right through her. I knew exactly where she was going. She smiled over her cup of coffee, probably thinking she'd gotten away with it. But I just nodded, pretending to buy the story. Inside, though, I was grinning. I had all the details, where she was going, who she'd be with, how long she'd be gone. She thought she was so smart, pulling the wool over my eyes, but she had no idea the trap I was setting. And as she finished her breakfast, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out the door with her bag packed, I couldn't help but think to myself, let the games begin. I'm going to spend the weekend with my parents, she said, sipping her coffee casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I just smiled, playing the part of the clueless husband she thought I was. That's nice, I replied, struggling to keep the smirk off my face. Be sure to give them my best. She smiled back, probably feeling triumphant, thinking she had fooled me. In her mind, she was off to do whatever she pleased while I stayed behind, none the wiser. But what she didn't realize was that her little game had already been flipped. The moment she stepped out of the door, I was ready. It was time to move from defense to offense, the real plan was about to kick off. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I felt the adrenaline hit me. But it wasn't fear or doubt that was making my heart race, it was pure anticipation. I wasn't playing the victim anymore. I was in control now. Grabbing my phone, I quickly sent a message to my friends, it's time. Not even 30 minutes later, they pulled up outside, bringing the party with them, booze, laughter, and 3 younger women who were more than eager to shake things up. The moment they walked through the door, the whole vibe changed. It felt like the air in the house shifted, signaling that everything was about to take a sharp turn. We didn't waste any time. The drinks started flowing immediately, and soon the house was filled with laughter, teasing, and the kind of reckless energy that only comes with alcohol. We threw back shots, toasting to the most ridiculous things, acting like a bunch of teenagers. It felt surreal, as if I had stepped into a completely different life for a night. The girls, all in their 20s, brought with them a wild, carefree energy that I hadn't felt in years. They were playful, flirty, and didn't care about anything except living in the moment. With every drink, the weight I had been carrying began to lift, even if just temporarily. And as the alcohol loosened my inhibitions, I couldn't help but smile to myself. I knew something my wife didn't, her precious little weekend fling wasn't going to happen. The guy. He had ghosted her. I'd made sure of that. He was far too scared of the consequences to go through with it. He had blocked her, leaving her hanging in a way that was bound to frustrate her. While she thought she was heading off to her secret rendezvous, I knew she'd soon be coming back, angry, embarrassed, and humiliated. But for now, I was going to enjoy myself. The girls, now tipsy and giggling uncontrollably, suggested we take things upstairs. The playful tension in the air shifted, becoming more electric, charged with anticipation. My head was spinning, and I could feel my own reservations fading with each shot. Why not? This was the payback she never saw coming. One of the girls grabbed my arm, tugging me upstairs like it was all some kind of thrilling game. When we reached the bedroom, things escalated fast. There was a lot of giggling, and soon enough, clothes started coming off like it was the most natural thing in the world. Piece by piece, I joined them, letting go of every restraint I had held onto for so long. It was surreal, between the alcohol, the adrenaline, and the wild chaos unfolding around me, it felt like I had stepped into another dimension. For years, I had been the dependable husband, the one who worked hard, provided, and always did the right thing. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, I was letting loose, embracing the reckless freedom I hadn't felt in ages. As we got undressed, the feeling of revenge burned hotter inside me. I was doing exactly what she never expected, taking back control, indulging in the very thing she had opened the door to. The girls, young, energetic, and completely uninhibited, made everything feel like a blur of heat and exhilaration. It was the kind of moment where nothing else exists, where the rush takes over and the world fades away. But just when I thought I was completely lost in the moment, I heard something. A voice that cut through the haze like a knife. What the hell is going on here? I didn't even hear the front door open. I hadn't heard her come up the stairs. But there she was, standing in the doorway, her face twisted in shock, disbelief, and pure, seething rage. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the sight of me in bed with three women, half naked, the room reeking of alcohol and bad choices. For a split second, the whole world seemed to freeze. I could see the confusion in her eyes, the anger boiling just beneath the surface. She had expected to come home to her safe, dependable husband, the man who would sit around waiting for her return. Instead, she had walked straight into my revenge, raw, unapologetic, and right in her face. She stood there, frozen in the doorway, unable to speak for a moment as she took it all in. And all I could do was stare back, waiting for whatever explosion was about to come next. I paused just long enough to turn and flash her the biggest, most sarcastic smile I could muster. "Oh, this?" I said, my voice dripping with mockery. "It's just part of the open relationship, sweetheart. You know, the one you wanted. By the way, how are your parents?" Her face went from flushed red to ghostly pale in an instant. I saw it, the moment it all clicked for her. She knew. She knew that I had figured it out, that I had orchestrated this entire thing. And seeing the realization dawn on her, seeing her understand that I'd turned the tables, it was like watching her crumble in real time. It hit her hard, like a punch she never saw coming. Then, she snapped. In a furious frenzy, she lunged at the bed, ripping the girls off me one by one. Her hands were shaking with rage as she flung their clothes at them, screaming for them to get out. The girls, too tipsy to care, just giggled, stumbling over each other as they gathered their things. They didn't put up much of a fight, not that they could have in their state. To them, it was all just a wild night that had taken an unexpected turn. They left, half-dressed, their laughter echoing through the hallway and out the door as they disappeared into the night. As soon as they were gone, she collapsed on the edge of the bed, her hands covering her face as the sobbing started. But it wasn't the kind of soft, subtle crying you could ignore. No, these were the deep, body-shaking sobs that tore through her like a storm. She couldn't stop it, couldn't control it. And honestly, I didn't care. I got dressed slowly, methodically, while she sat there unraveling beside me. There was no rush. I took my time, buttoning up my shirt, straightening my belt, making sure everything was just right. Once I was done, I sat down next to her. I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. Not anymore. This was all on her. She had pushed us here, and now she was drowning in the mess she created. "How was your date?" I asked, my tone casual, almost indifferent. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, the tears still streaming down her cheeks. And then it hit her, she knew. She knew I had planned this, set her up, that everything had been under my control from the start. She didn't need to say anything. The look in her eyes said it all. She opened her mouth to say something, to defend herself, maybe to beg, but I didn't give her the chance. "Don't bother," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "You'll hear from a lawyer tomorrow. We're done. I'm filing for divorce." I stood up, looking down at her one last time, no longer seeing the woman I had once loved, just the person who had betrayed me. There's no point in fighting it. What's done is done. With that, I walked out, leaving her there with nothing but her tears and regrets. No more arguments, no more drama. I was done. She had made her bed, and now she'd have to lie in it. The next day, with everything still fresh in my mind, I knew I needed to clear my head and get things off my chest. My friends had been by my side through thick and thin, but this was a new level of insanity. I shot them a text early that morning, and they all agreed to meet at our usual spot, the local bar where we'd spent countless nights sharing stories. But today, the story was all mine. When I walked into the bar, they were already seated at our regular table, beers in hand, grinning like they knew exactly what I was about to say. The second I sat down, one of them leaned forward with a smirk. "All right, man, we've been waiting to hear this. Don't leave out a single detail." That was all the invitation I needed. I dove right into it, telling them everything, from the moment she left the house, thinking she was heading off to her little affair, to the moment I found out her lover had blocked her, leaving her stranded and humiliated. They were hooked on every word, their expressions shifting from disbelief to laughter as I recounted the scene in the bedroom, the drinks, the girls, and, of course, the grand finale, her walking in on me in the middle of it all. Wait, one of my buddies interrupted, barely able to contain his laughter. "She just walks in, and you hit her with, 'Oh hey, it's just part of the open relationship.' Man, that's legendary." I couldn't help but laugh too. "Yeah, pretty much. She was frozen at first, didn't know what to do, and then she just lost it. She started screaming, throwing the girls out of the house like she hadn't been the one asking for an open relationship just days earlier." The table erupted in laughter. For a moment, the weight of everything lifted, replaced by the shared humor and the sense of victory that came from turning the situation on its head. But as the laughter died down, I realized something. This wasn't just about getting revenge anymore. It was about moving on. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could. Another friend shook his head in disbelief, taking a long swig of his beer. "Man, you pulled that off perfectly. I'd have paid good money to see her face." The laughter at the table grew louder as I kept going, describing how, after she kicked the girls out, she just sat there on the bed, completely broken, crying her heart out, and how I calmly, without any drama, told her that a lawyer would be calling her the next day to discuss the divorce. One of the quieter guys leaned back in his chair, smirking. "I gotta say, I'm a little envious. 3 girls at once, and she had to walk in and witness the whole thing. That's the ultimate revenge." I just shook my head, still grinning. Yeah, it was definitely something. But to be honest, it wasn't even about the girls or getting revenge in the way you might think. It was more about proving a point, showing her that she didn't get to call the shots anymore. She wasn't the one pulling the strings. The table fell quiet for a moment as they all took that in. Yeah, revenge had been a part of it, but the bigger piece was reclaiming my dignity after she'd shredded it with her betrayal. It was about standing my ground, showing her that I wasn't going to be her pawn. I raised my glass, meeting each of their eyes. "I gotta thank you guys. Seriously. You had my back through all of this, and I don't know how I would have gotten through it without you." They clinked their glasses with mine, and for a brief moment, the room felt heavy with solidarity. These were the friends who had been there through everything, thick and thin, and this mess was no different. I wouldn't have been able to handle it without them. As we finished our drinks, I started talking about the divorce process. The funny thing? The divorce wasn't even the dramatic part. After everything that had gone down, I think my ex just realized there was no fight left in her. It was like she knew she'd lost, and dragging it out was pointless. One of the guys raised an eyebrow. No screaming matches. No last-minute theatrics. I shook my head. Nope, surprisingly calm. We split everything pretty evenly. I wasn't out to take her for everything, I mean, why bother? The house, the cars, everything just got divided without much fuss. I think she was just too tired to fight at that point, and honestly, so was I. They all nodded. We'd seen divorces that went on for years, with both sides trying to destroy each other. But this? This felt like we both knew the game was over. No use pretending anymore. She signed the papers, and that was that. So, what now? One of my friends asked, leaning forward. You got your freedom back, what are you going to do with it? I smiled, but there was a certain weariness behind it. I don't know, man. Right now, I'm just focusing on moving forward. I spent enough time looking back, trying to figure out where everything went wrong. It's time to let go of all that and just start fresh. We spent the rest of the night drinking, laughing, and sharing stories, but the weight of everything still lingered. By the time I left the bar, though, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I felt like I was truly closing the door on that chapter of my life. And it was about time. And now, for anyone reading this, thanks for sticking around to hear my story. It's not easy going through something like this, but I can tell you, you can make it out the other side, no matter how messy it gets. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you've got to pay attention. Don't get so comfortable that you stop noticing what's happening right in front of you. Look at your spouse, really look. Don't let things fall apart without realizing it, and if they do, don't be afraid to take control of the situation. Trust me, you don't want to end up blindsided, finding out the hard way like I did. It's been a little over a year since everything went down, and I figured it's about time to give you an update on where my life is now. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much has changed. When you're in the middle of the storm, it feels like life is unraveling, but now, it feels like everything's falling into place in ways I never could have imagined. First off, the divorce, it's done, over, and completely behind me. Honestly, it was the best decision I've ever made, and I haven't looked back once. The process was surprisingly smooth, especially considering how nasty things could have gotten. I've heard the horror stories, divorces that drag on for years, with court battles and bitter fights over every little detail. But in my case, after that final confrontation, my ex seemed too worn out to fight. Whether she realized there was no point or just wanted out as much as I did, I don't know. But we split the house, the cars, the money, and that was that. A clean break. I got what I needed, and she got exactly what she deserved. Now, let's talk about what really matters, life after the dust settled. It's been a whirlwind, but in the best way possible. After the divorce, I made a conscious decision to focus on myself, really for the first time in years. And I'm not just talking about the typical, get in shape, stuff, though yeah, I did that too. It's crazy how much freedom and motivation can light a fire under you. I dropped some weight, packed on a bit of muscle, and honestly, I'm in the best shape I've been in since my 20s. But the physical stuff? That's only scratching the surface. The real transformation happened on the inside. For the first time in a long time, I started thinking about what I wanted, what kind of future I wanted to build for myself, now that I wasn't trapped in a toxic relationship. That question wasn't easy to answer at first. I had to sit down and really face myself, figure out what I was passionate about, what I cared about beyond just surviving. One of the biggest surprises. My career. I threw myself into my work, not just to distract myself, but to rebuild myself. The funny thing is, once I stopped holding back and started taking some real risks, things began to fall into place. I had this idea for a side business, something I'd been sitting on for years but never had the nerve to go after. Without getting too detailed, it's a tech-related venture, something I've always been passionate about, but life, and the weight of my old relationship, kept pushing it to the back burner. After the divorce, I finally took the leap and put real time and energy into making it happen. It wasn't smooth sailing at first, there were plenty of late nights, a lot of second-guessing myself, and wondering if I was just chasing some pipe dream. But slowly, piece by piece, it started coming together. I built a small team, got a couple of investors interested, and before I knew it, the business was off the ground. A year later, we're not just getting by, we're thriving. I'm not saying I'm rolling in money or anything, but the success I've had with this venture has given me a sense of pride and purpose I haven't felt in a long time. It's been empowering, seeing something I built start to take off. Even got a little recognition in the local business scene, nothing major, but it felt good to see my hard work pay off in a real, tangible way. And the best part? I'm doing all of this on my own terms. No one to answer to but myself. It's a freedom I never thought I'd experience after being stuck in such a suffocating marriage for so many years. On the personal side, life has been great, actually, better than great. I've reconnected with old friends, made some new ones, and most importantly, I've rediscovered the joy of my own company. For a while after the divorce, I purposely stayed single. I wasn't interested in anything serious. I needed time to heal, to clear my head, and to figure out who I was outside of being somebody's husband. But, as life often goes, someone eventually came into the picture. We met through mutual friends, nothing planned or expected, and we just clicked. She's incredible, smart, funny, independent. The best part? She's not looking for anything from me except honesty and a good time. No drama, no baggage, no heavy expectations. It's a breath of fresh air, to say the least. I'm taking things slow this time around. I'm not rushing into anything serious, but for the first time in a long while, I feel optimistic about where things could go. I'm not putting any pressure on it, just enjoying the ride. As for my ex-wife, well, from what I've heard through the grapevine, things haven't been smooth for her. She's bounced through a few relationships since the divorce, but none of them seem to have lasted. I don't wish her ill anymore, I'm over that now. If anything, I just hope she finds whatever it is she's searching for, though part of me doubts she ever will. People like her, always looking for something they can't find, tend to stay lost. Looking back, it's wild to think about how much my life has transformed in just over a year. If you told me a year ago that I'd be running a successful business, feeling better than ever, and dating someone new, I wouldn't have believed it. But here I am. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes you have to lose everything to really find yourself. So to anyone reading this, especially if you're going through something similar, just know that it gets better. I know it doesn't seem like it in the middle of it all, but trust me, it does. You just have to stick it out, take control of your life, and don't be afraid to make the tough calls when you need to. So yeah, I guess you could say life's pretty damn good right now, and I plan to keep it that way.